Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Young and the Restless channel. Hope you're having a wonderful day. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe and hit like for more daily drama updates and spoilers. Your support truly means a lot and helps our channel grow every day. Now let's jump straight into today's exciting update. In the ever-twisting world of Genoa City, questions are beginning to swirl around the uncertain future of Kyle Abbott, especially as his romantic life appears to be slipping further into instability. The turning point comes after Claire Newman makes it painfully clear to Holden Novak that her feelings for Kyle are gone, leaving no ambiguity behind. That emotional revelation signals a major shift, as Claire seems genuinely ready to move forward and leave that chapter of her life behind. But while Claire is stepping into a new direction with certainty, Kyle is left standing at a crossroads, uncertain of what comes next for him. The emotional fallout of this breakup doesn't just affect Kyle's personal life, it sends ripples through the entire romantic landscape surrounding him. At the same time, another storm quietly brews in the form of Victoria Newman, who finds herself trapped in her own romantic uncertainty. Her connection with Nate Hastings once looked like it was heading toward a reunion, as if fate was gently steering them back together. But just as quickly as that possibility appeared, the show seemed to pull back, leaving their future unresolved and hanging in limbo. Now, instead of clear romantic direction, viewers are seeing a shift toward friendly familiarity between Victoria and Nate again, as if the emotional temperature between them is being carefully reset. Yet beneath that surface calm, the question lingers. Whether this renewed comfort is simply a pause before something deeper reignites, or the quiet end of what might have been. What makes everything even more intriguing is the growing sense that Kyle and Victoria's romantic paths are not separate at all, but are instead slowly colliding in a way no one fully expected. Fans have begun noticing how often Kyle Abbott and Victoria Newman share scenes together, as if the narrative keeps pulling them into each other's orbit. Their interactions are often charged with tension, especially when Kyle openly challenges Victoria for her refusal to stand up more firmly to her powerful father, Victor Newman. These confrontations might seem purely argumentative on the surface, but they carry an undercurrent that feels increasingly difficult to ignore. Even more telling was their unexpected New Year's Eve moment when Kyle and Victoria were seen celebrating the beginning of 2026 together, a detail that left many viewers questioning whether something deeper was quietly being set in motion. As speculation continues to build, the most striking confirmation doesn't come from the screen alone, but from something that slipped out behind the scenes. A leaked wardrobe tag photo surfaced, revealing internal production notes connected to Victoria Newman, including details about her scenes, interactions, and even her wardrobe planning for specific moments. Among those carefully documented notes was a particularly explosive clue, an almost kiss with Kyle. That single detail suggests that the tension between Victoria and Kyle is not only intentional, but also escalating towards something far more intimate. While it remains uncertain whether this moment will be a turning point or just a tease, it strongly implies that their connection is moving toward dangerous emotional territory. And because Victoria is Claire's mother, the fallout promises to be even more explosive, as Claire is unlikely to stay silent if her mother begins developing feelings for her former boyfriend. With all these pieces falling into place, it becomes clear that the relationship dynamics in Genoa City are heading toward a dramatic collision filled with tension, temptation, and emotional consequences. The growing attraction between Victoria Newman and Kyle Abbott is no longer just subtle background tension. It is becoming a central force that could reshape multiple relationships around them. What begins as emotional conflict and shared frustration is now evolving into something far more complicated, something that threatens to ignite controversy across families and friendships alike. And as the story continues to unfold, one thing is certain. This connection is no longer just about possibility. It is about how far they are willing to go before everything changes. As the tension between Victoria Newman and Kyle Abbott continues to simmer beneath the surface, Genoa City begins to feel like it is slowly tightening around them, as if every shared glance and every heated exchange is pulling them closer to a breaking point they can no longer avoid. What once felt like simple disagreement or generational clash has now transformed into something far more volatile, where frustration and attraction seem to exist side by side in a dangerously delicate balance. Each interaction between them carries a strange emotional weight, as though both are becoming increasingly aware that their connection is no longer purely professional or casual. Even when they argue, there is an undeniable intensity in the air, a pull that neither seems fully willing or fully able to ignore. And with every passing encounter, that unspoken tension grows heavier, setting the stage for something that feels inevitable rather than accidental. Meanwhile, the emotional aftermath of Claire's detachment from Kyle continues to echo in unexpected ways, especially as Claire's absence from his romantic world leaves a void that he has yet to understand how to fill. That void doesn't just isolate Kyle emotionally, it subtly shifts the way he reacts to the people still around him, particularly Victoria. With Claire moving forward and emotionally detaching, Kyle is left in a vulnerable space where old boundaries feel less defined and new possibilities begin to quietly surface. And in that emotional uncertainty, the connection with Victoria Newman starts to feel less like coincidence and more like an unfolding path neither of them fully anticipated. Every shared scene now feels charged with something unspoken, as if both are standing on the edge of a decision they haven't consciously made yet but are already drifting toward. At the same time, Victoria's own emotional landscape becomes increasingly complicated as she tries to balance family pressure, personal desire, and unresolved romantic history. Her lingering connection to Nate Hastings still exists in the background, but it no longer carries the same clarity or direction it once seemed to promise. Instead, what remains is a quiet ambiguity, a sense that their story may have paused rather than progressed, leaving Victoria emotionally suspended between past possibility and present uncertainty. And in that emotional space, Kyle's presence becomes more noticeable, more persistent, and increasingly difficult to dismiss as just another relationship in her orbit. What once may have been framed as tension over leadership, responsibility, or family loyalty now begins to feel layered with something deeper, something neither Victoria nor Kyle is fully acknowledging out loud. As these emotional threads begin to intertwine, the leaked wardrobe clue about the almost kiss takes on even greater significance, not as an isolated spoiler, but as a glimpse into a turning point already in motion. It suggests that the narrative is not simply teasing attraction, it is actively building toward a moment where restraint finally gives way to impulse and emotional tension spills into physical closeness. And when that moment arrives, it will not exist in a vacuum. It will collide directly with the fragile relationships already surrounding both characters, especially the deeply personal connection between Victoria and Claire. The fallout would not just be romantic, it would be deeply personal, emotionally charged, and potentially explosive within the Newman-Abbott dynamic. All of this leads to a growing sense that Victoria and Kyle are no longer on separate romantic paths, but are instead converging toward a single, unavoidable turning point that could redefine everything around them. What began as subtle friction and unexpected proximity is now evolving into a storyline driven by emotional risk, temptation, and consequences that reach far beyond just two people. And as Genoa City continues to shift under the weight of these unfolding connections, one truth becomes increasingly clear. When Victoria Newman and Kyle Abbott finally cross that line, nothing in their world will remain the same again. As the pressure builds, both Victoria Newman and Kyle Abbott begin to feel the weight of everything they are not saying. It is no longer just about passing tension in conversation or occasional disagreement. It has become something quieter, more dangerous, something that lingers in silence long after they part ways. Even in moments when they try to maintain distance, life keeps pulling them back into the same spaces, the same conversations, the same charged pauses where words almost form but never fully escape. And in those suspended seconds, the emotional barrier between them feels thinner than ever, as if one wrong look could finally collapse it completely. What makes it even more intense is that neither of them seems able to fully step away, even if part of them knows they should. At the same time, the world around them is slowly preparing for the consequences they have not yet faced. The shadow of Claire's emotional departure from Kyle continues to loom, and when Claire Newman eventually realizes how close her mother is getting to her former boyfriend, the fallout will not be quiet. It will be deeply personal and emotionally charged. Family lines in Genoa City have always been fragile, but this situation threatens to blur them in ways that cannot easily be repaired once broken. And as Victoria and Kyle continue drifting closer to that inevitable almost kiss moment, the sense of anticipation turns heavier, almost suffocating, as if the story itself is holding its breath. Because now it is no longer a question of if something will happen between them, but how much will be destroyed when it finally does. With the emotional storm continuing to intensify, Victoria Newman and Kyle Abbott find themselves stepping into a space where avoidance no longer works, and every interaction feels increasingly loaded with meaning they cannot easily ignore. What once might have been dismissed as coincidence or professional overlap now feels deliberately aligned, as if life itself keeps placing them in each other's path at exactly the wrong or perhaps right moment. Even their most ordinary exchanges begin to carry an undercurrent of emotional tension, where a simple pause or lingering glance says more than words ever could. And as they continue navigating this fragile connection, both start to sense that something irreversible is quietly forming beneath the surface. The more they try to maintain control, the more the situation slips toward emotional inevitability. At the same time, the emotional stakes rise even higher because the fallout is no longer just hypothetical, it is waiting on the horizon. The connection between Kyle and Victoria is no longer a private tension. It is becoming a potential disruption that could ripple through multiple lives once exposed. With Claire Newman already emotionally detached from Kyle, the discovery of her mother's growing closeness to him would strike at the deepest layer of personal trust and family loyalty. And in Genoa City, where relationships are already fragile and history always comes back to haunt the present, such a betrayal would not stay contained for long. It would spread, intensify, and reshape alliances in ways no one involved is truly prepared for. All of this builds toward that pivotal moment hinted at behind the scenes, the almost kiss that now feels less like speculation and more like an approaching reality. Between Victoria Newman and Kyle Abbott, the emotional distance has narrowed to almost nothing, leaving only hesitation standing between restraint and surrender. And when that final barrier finally cracks, it will not just be a romantic development, it will be the spark that ignites a much larger chain reaction of consequences. Because in Genoa City, no secret stays buried for long, and no forbidden connection ever unfolds without leaving damage in its wake.